Greetings! You are listening to Horror Nerds at Church, a podcast where we take a deep dive into a horror film and talk about what it can teach us about God, the Bible, and each other. My name is Pace, and I am flying solo today. My co-host, Joe, who usually joins me, is a little bit busy right now. It's the end of the semester when we were recording this, so we were not able to record our regular scheduled episode for this week, which was going to be on The Ring. Do not worry, that's still going to be coming out. That's going to be our episode next week, 2002's The Ring, the American remake. So definitely come back next week for that. But since we were not able to record that episode in enough time for it to release on Thursday, our usual scheduled episode date, we wanted to make sure that we didn't leave you all without anything to listen to. So we are instead surprising you all with a short little minisode today. This minisode is an outtake from our introductory episode where Joe and I introduced ourselves and told a few stories. That episode is running a little bit long, so what we did instead was we cut out one of the ghost stories at the end that each of us told. And so that's what we're going to put in today for you to listen to. Basically, Joe tells a ghost story about his grandmother. I tell a ghost story about when I lived in Gettysburg. So it's just a real short and sweet little mini-sode for you all to listen to with some extra stories from our lives. And then, like I said, next week we'll return with The Ring and go back to our regularly scheduled programming. So hopefully you can enjoy this episode. And feel free to let us know your own ghost stories, whether it's on Facebook or any of our other social media sites. We love to hear from you all. So thank you for your patience as we take this week off to give us some extra time to record our episode on The Ring and then the rest of the movies we're doing coming up. Thank you so much and enjoy. So we kind of already got to this a little bit. But do you believe in ghosts? And do you have any real life ghost stories?
You're right. We did skirt this a little bit, but I really like how this question frames it in another angle. Do I believe in ghosts? Um, so the question in and of itself is so provocative. Like it's very obvious about what it wants to be. Do you believe in ghosts? It's pretty much a kind of a yes or no answer, at least for me. And the answer would be yes. I do believe in ghosts. Maybe not necessarily in the way they're often portrayed in horror movies or unsolved mysteries and shows of that nature that seem to be really popular these days, these paranormal theme shows. You have those investigators who are investigating haunted houses and that sort of thing. And I believe that that sort of thing is a component of what it can be to believe in ghosts. But I believe and as far as believing in ghosts, I think it's like an entire dimension, with a lot of, I guess, moving parts, which is kind of a paradoxical way of saying it because ghosts implies an afterlife where you're kind of supposed to be at rest. But no, I believe that after this life there is a lot of activity that continues in ways that are very different from the kinds of activities here in the world of the living. I've definitely felt presences before. And I have to say, if there is one real life ghost story that I could tell, it's not even a spooky one at all. Um, and it kind of disabuses the notion of how a ghost story has to be, creepy or scary. And that story is, and as you know, Pace, I recently lost my maternal grandmother. She was my only remaining grandparent, and she happens to be the one I was much, much closer to than any of the other grandparents. And it was a very sudden death. Nobody was expecting her to suffer anything. She was 87 and she was also very healthy, and so this came as a shock to everyone. And when we traveled all the way back to the Philippines, halfway around the world, that there were a lot of feelings that we felt. And so I was processing all of that while I was walking up to her casket in utter disbelief that she wouldn't be, walking to me to hug me or to feed me as Filipino, grandmas and moms always tend to do. And it was just wild to think that she was in another place, that dimension that I keep mentioning, and not in person. And so I walked up to her casket and I had a conversation with her, a very prayerful conversation. um, and I noticed all of a sudden that there was this bug. It was a flying bug. It had very noticeable wings, and it wouldn't go away. And in the middle of my solemn and very somber farewell conversation with my grandma, I was just like swatting away at this bug, and I finally gave up. And I attempted to continue my farewell with my grandmother. And then what happens is that the bug just ends up sitting at the fold of one of the cloths that's covering the casket, and it just kind of perches itself there. And I'm looking at it, and I'm staring at it, and it's kind of staring back at me. But at this point, the main thing on my mind is, what kind of bug is that? Because I couldn't identify it. It seemed to look like a dragonfly, but it didn't seem to be large enough to be a dragonfly. And so I was throwing all of these guesses in my head until I finally realized, oh shit, grandma, is that you? um and the bug just stayed there until I went away. It was wild. And so I believe that was my grandma in some form. Even though there was a bit of a misunderstanding because I kept trying to swat her away. Yeah, I really believe in what happened there.
For sure, yeah. I don't have any sentimental stories like that that pack quite the emotional punch, because that's amazing and beautiful. My stories are just like silly. I think my refrigerator when I lived in Gettysburg was possessed by a ghost
A,
kind of stories.
a hungry ghost.
Right? I mean, it was perfect ghost to live with me. But yeah, when I lived in Gettysburg, I went to Gettysburg Seminary, now United Lutheran Seminary. And so I lived on campus for 3 out of the 4 years that I attended there. And I have so many like weird, spooky stories just living in Gettysburg with so much history and the bloodiest few days of the Civil War and just
Yeah.
this. The seminary itself, a few of the buildings are um, were there during the Civil War. The main building was called Old Dorm, or Schmucker Hall. In
Mm,
fact, was used as a hospital after the Civil War, and it has this uh, balcony on top. I can't remember quite what it's called, but
mhm,
there's like little circular balconies on top, at the very top of the building. And apparently that was used by both the Union and Confederate soldiers to kind of
mm,
spy out the town and take the lay of the land. So
mhm.
all sorts of stories from there, and living on a campus that was that kind of had that kind of history attached to it too. Not to mention it was part of the Underground Railroad because it was in Gettysburg, like right over the Mason Dixon line, stuff like that. So a lot of history living here. So I swear, like every single person who lived on campus had a ghost story from Gettysburg that they encountered one place or another. The
I believe
scariest
it.
one, though, is probably yeah, I was taking a late night walk with a few friends through the battlefield, and suddenly it just like out of the blue got very misty.
Mm,
And it was twilight, like it wasn't quite dark yet. It was probably like 9 o'clock on a fall day, so still a little bit of residual light. The stars were just starting to come out,
mm-hmm.
but really, um, really foggy. And like we
Mm.
see what appears um, to be a few people in the far foreground. So my friend Steve was with me, and we were kind of a little spooked out. So
Yeah.
our other friends were like, "You guys go ahead and investigate. We're going to stay back here. We don't want to know what's going on down there." And so they kind of walked up ahead, and Steve and I just kind of were talking, like trailing behind them a bit.
Yeah.
And then, like up ahead, we both stopped dead in our tracks. We saw this massive shape, like just probably about 15 feet away from us in the fog, and it was like this giant horse with a person on top of it. We're like, who
Oh,
the fuck is that? What is that? Scared shitless. And we just kind of saw the horse standing there in the middle of the road, and then it trotted off to the side, and then we even heard some of the sounds, like the clapping of its feet and all that. And
oh my
then
gosh. No.
yeah, and then we see suddenly like flashlights of our friends heading back toward us, and we're like, "Oh my god, did you see that horse?" And they're like, "No, there wasn't a horse there. We saw you guys. We didn't see any horse." So like, definitely a ghost of some sort, I guess. I don't know, a Civil War soldier, perhaps. I don't know. It
Oh my,
was
wow.
That was definitely the spookiest one.
Uh, you have a real knack of setting the scene, and as you were talking, I was imagining that 90s movie Sleepy Hollow. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
I think it
the
had
one with Johnny Depp.
Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I was imagining. Your Confederate soldier on a horse. That's that's wild.
Yeah. Um, but I also had a refrigerator ghost, as I said before too, who lived in my refrigerator. Sometimes he'd bounce over to my TV and turn off my TV. And then he'd
Did,
bounce back over to the refrigerator and start knocking on the inside of the freezer.
and is that all that refrigerator ghost did? Was just bounce
As far
around
as
in
I
the
know, he
fridge?
seemed kind of friendly.
Oh.
I mean,
Okay.
like, I'm sure it was just my electronics being weird or the motor in the fridge or something, but I
No,
swear,
no, no.
you never
No,
know. Could be something else.
no, I empathize with you there, my friend. I live in an old apartment building that makes many strange noises, and a neighbor of mine who I'm pretty close to, in terms of a friendship, but she's also very close to me physically. We both make fun of the strange noises that this building makes, and we sometimes ascribe those noises to ghosts. And for the most part, they seem as innocuous and even friendly as your refrigerator ghosts. But considering the fact that we are in the Bay Area, we often wonder to ourselves, okay, great, there are ghosts here, but can they help us pay the rent, please? Give us
Right,
$100 at least or something. If you're gonna knock around in a refrigerator, you got to help out with at least the utilities.
right. It's only fair.
It's only fair. Uh, wow, so it looks like we at the end of our question list? Do you think?
This is Future Pace coming back. I hope you all enjoyed our short little outtakes from the introductory episode of us sharing some ghost stories. Do not forget to come back next week for The Ring. We'll be covering The Ring, 2002, Gore Vidal's American remake. Fun movie. But until next week, that's it for our show. Our theme music was by Matt May, who also edited this episode. Horror Nerds at Church releases every Thursday. Please comment, rate, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Horror Nerds at Church and Twitter at HNAC Pod for all the latest updates about upcoming films, news, and other announcements. Until next time, stay safe, everyone. Talk to y'all later. Bye.